Hi. Josh is wandering right now. He's out somewhere on the road, so I have to introduce myself. Uh, my name is Rabbi Pinchas Winston. I'm the person who seems to be doing this on Thursday nights, and Josh usually always introduces by saying it's going to be a wonderful shir because he has a lot of confidence and trust in me. But I'm just going to say that hopefully you'll enjoy it and get something out of it in the end. But and then you'll decide at the end if you enjoyed it or not. This is Parshas Vayikra. We have just changed from Sefer Shmos to Sefer Vayikra. We finished one book last week's Parsha, well, actually with two Parshas, double Parsha, Vayakel, Pekudei, and Shabbos HaChodesh as well. And now we've gone to Parshas Vayikra, Sefer Vayikra, and it's English is called Leviticus because it has all kinds of laws to do with the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the tabernacle, and it was the forerunner to the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, and all the Levitical service that was going to take place. What the Kohanim did, and what the Levim did as well, primarily the Kohanim. So that's why it got its English name Leviticus, from the word Levi, Levites. But in Hebrew, it's Vayikra. And the reason why is because usually the first word of the first parsha of the Torah, of that book, usually becomes the name of the book itself, which kind of seems very random. But it's not. Everything is divine providence. Nothing happens accidentally or randomly. There's always some kind of meaning in, because we can always choose differently. The second word, the third word. But it's also a reminder. I mean, Exodus is about the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, but it's not called Exodus in the Hebrew. It's not called Yitzis Mitzrayim, Sefer Yitzis Mitzrayim, although it could be. In Hebrew, it's called Shmos because it starts off talking about the names of the tribes, but the names mean something. They're very significant. Of course, Bereshis in the beginning, because that's all about the beginning of everything, not just the beginning of the world, but also the beginning of the Jewish people, the beginning of moving mankind in the direction of what God expects from them and what creation requires. But there's a lot of laws, a lot of details, a lot of narration, some drama, mostly technical material in this particular sefer. What's it all about? There's so many ways, so many books have been written on Torah. I mean, it's the most read book in all of history. You won't find it on the New York Times bestsellers list because they don't really keep track of that one. But it's sold more books than any other book in the history of mankind. It's been read by more people than any other book in the history of mankind because it is, by the way, over 3,000 years old. And that's a long time for a book to be around, which itself is kind of a testament to its eternal nature. Other books have been spawned based upon it. Other religions have come about because of it, and it's everything. I mean, the Medrash itself. Excuse me. The Medrash itself talks about how God used the Torah itself as the blueprint for all of creation. He opened it up. Looked. I mean, he didn't have to open it up. He knew it off by heart. But it means that basically that whatever is in this world, whatever exists, even the things that are so anti-Torah, by definition, have to have their root in Torah somewhere because it's all within the Torah. And that's what it says in Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ben Bagbag says, a certain particular person, that turn it over because everything's inside of it. And you see the Talmud. It's called the Sea of Talmud because basically that it's a sea of thought. I mean, it's like literally massive, usually this wide, sitting on the shelf, 36 different tractates, like sections. And that's not even all of it. It's all that we have written down right now, but there's so much more other material that did not make it into the Talmud, although the Talmud covers a lot of different topics and ideas in the course of his discussions. There's also Jerusalem Talmud, which actually does have additional sections that the Babylonian Talmud doesn't contain, but there's Mishnah, there's Halacha, and there's commentaries, and there's commentaries on the commentaries, and there's commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries. You get the idea. The Rambam, Maimonides, who in his time, going back to around 1100 to the 12th century, and he saw where history was going. He saw that the Jewish people were going further into exile. It was becoming increasingly more difficult to learn, to find a rabbi. Once upon a time, we all lived in Eretz Yisrael. You can go to the Beis Hamikdash. There were all kinds of big Talmidei Chachamim walking the land. You could just learn almost anywhere you wanted to go if you really wanted to. Then we got spread out. The Romans came along, the fourth and final exile, the Jewish people put us in different parts of the world. Now we're all over the world. Literally the four corners of the earth. I mean, the Torah says, going back 3,000 years, that God will gather us from the four corners of the earth at the end of days. And at that time, like, what are you talking about? First of all, it's round, okay, but that was before Columbus, so maybe people thought it was square at that time. But we're all together. Four corners of the earth. Well, yeah. Now we are basically pretty much. It's amazing for such a small people how there are so many Jews in different places all around the world, and it just shows you how this prophecy was really, looking ahead and knew it was going to happen in the future. But because of that, we went into the diaspora, and it was very difficult to find teachers, to find people to ask questions to. So the Rambam, to make it easier for everybody, decided to take 10 years, like literally, hold himself up for 10 years, go through the entire Talmud, decide difficult halachic issues that were in the Talmud that were left unresolved or had to be updated. So this, for the sake of, the principles always stay the same, but the applications change because as technology advances, so do the applications, of the halachas. For example, maybe God said that you cannot turn a light bulb on Shabbos to Moshe Rabbeinu and explain and show them the future, because he did see the future anyhow. Rabbi Kiva was something he saw in the future. He saw the end of days, so he probably saw light bulbs too. So maybe God said these things, when they finally make them later on in the future, they shouldn't turn them on Shabbos. The Shabbos clock is okay, Moshe, but not clicking the switch. But don't tell the people that, because they don't have that prophecy. They have no idea what you're talking about. That's later on. So some rabbi 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, whenever Edison came along and discovered the light bulb, made the light bulb for the first time. So they had to analyze it based upon the principles of fire, and building connections, all these different things to see whether light bulb actually is something you can turn on in Shabbos and turn off if you have to, but or want to. And that's always changing. And as a result of that, the sea of Talmud, is massive to begin with, but that, it just becomes more massive as you apply, you add all these applications of the laws. And the Rambam thought, okay, I'm going to make it simpler for people, and just read a 14-volume, magnus opus, compendium of the Talmud, which is pretty much as big as the Talmud to some extent. But the difference is, though, it doesn't go through all the discussions and the mystery, and it lays things out very, very practically, step by step. He was a forerunner for so many. Well, there are others doing it before him, but we were evolving in that direction. Eventually, the Shulchan Aruch, and today we have the Mishnah Berurah and others for him. Other books written to try to simplify halacha, just tell you what it is, the way it is, so you can just do it right and not have to work it out. You should still anyhow. If you're somebody who's fortunate enough to be able to spend time learning Talmud and trace the laws back to their origins and see what the discussions are behind them, then it just makes you smarter, and it makes you more appreciative of what you're doing, serving God. But not everyone can do that. People work and they have very busy schedules, and sometimes people don't have the mental capacity to go through all of that, or at least very fast at all. So therefore, the Rambam made it that this would be on the shelves of every Jew, accessible, learn the halacha, organize, categorize the whole thing. And he said that this book will end the need for all other books. And of course, that's like them fighting words in a sense, because it turns out that no book other than the Torah itself has spawned other books more than the Mishnah Torah, the Yad Chazaka of the Rambam, because he was so brilliant and he made decisions, and in his effort to simplify things, there were people who wanted to know how he got those conclusions. So there's all kinds of commentaries, and then commentaries on the commentaries, etc., all the way through history. So it's vast. It's like, and it's so exciting to learn once you know how to learn it. And you just feel the power of knowing so many godly ideas. And, it's easy. It's easy, just like being at sea. It's like easy to get lost, easy to just think just another halacha, another idea, another concept, because They just keep coming at you, nonstop. Someone once asked me if I ever got writer's block, and I probably would have if I was writing something secular, if I was writing something that was just based upon my own imagination. That's what happens. You run out of ideas at some point in time. But you're writing about Torah, you don't get writer's block. It's like this bottomless pit, a bottomless well of ideas and concepts, just to reach in and draw them out, and then write a book about them. And then you can find other sources and other connections. And the more you learn, the more you're able to see. The amazing thing is, and I can go for another hour like this, right? Which I'm sure you wouldn't want, but I could, because that would be not enough, because we're talking about Torah, which is eternal and infinite. It's the word of God, and therefore there really is no limit to how much you can talk about it or the ideas. But the amazing thing is, truly amazing thing is, that all of it, literally all of it, the whole vast sea of Torah that goes on infinitely in every direction, can be summed up by one teensy little aleph at the end of the first word in this week's parsha. Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. God called to Moshe Rabbeinu. The first word is Vayikra. That's why it's called Vayikra, right? And it means and he called, right? The Lakra is to call someone. Vayikra, and God called Moshe Rabbeinu to talk, start teaching him the laws, that are necessary for functioning in the Mishkan and the temple eventually. And he called to him. And if you look in a Sefer Torah and you look at that very first word, it says Vayikra, right? Except for one thing. You'll notice that the aleph at the end of the word, Vav Yud Kuf Resh Aleph, the aleph itself is a little smaller, significantly smaller than the other four letters that precede it. Now, we know that these things are not by accident. It doesn't happen because the sofer ran out of space. It's not because the sofer can't afford to buy more ink, and therefore he's conserving it wherever he can. That's not what's going on. This is Sefer Torah. This is a word of God. You don't play games. These are traditions handed down going back to Moshe at Mount Sinai. That aleph has to be smaller. And Rashi picks up on it right away, and he tells us the difference. Why is this aleph small? Because if you stand back and look at the word, it looks more like the word Vayikar, because the aleph is so small. You know it's there. You know the word is Vayikra. You know it is. But looking at it, it looks like Vayikar, right? And that's a different word. Vayikar is from the word Mikra, which means kind of like a circumstantial situation, random, I guess would be the word to be. There's no randomness, clearly, in the Torah world. In the whole world, there's nothing. Essentially, it's just random coincidence. It could be coincidence, but it's planned by God. God makes the coincidence. I guess it's not, you still call it coincidence, things coinciding, but it's all planned. As the Talmud says succinctly in very different places, that a person doesn't even stub their finger unless it's already been decreed in Shemayim. Nothing happens by chance. So that aleph is there for a reason. So Rashi explains, Rashi explains right there on the spot that this aleph is to signify the difference between the people whom God trusts, and God loves, and wants to have a relationship with, and the people he doesn't. To the ones he loves, like Moshe Rabbeinu, he uses the lashon Vayikra, and he called. Vayikra is the language that the angels use, v'karazel zeh, where they call to one another. So the word Vayikra alludes to this relationship, this desire to connect with somebody else or something else. So the word Vayikra means that God cherished his time with Moshe Rabbeinu, and he called him as someone would call and someone that was endeared to them. But the word Vayikar, which means kind of like happen chance, that it's like not organized, it's not scheduled, it's not an act of love in any way. That we find that God appeared, chanced upon Bilam at nighttime to give him his prophecy. And Bilam didn't know it was coming. Bilam, he couldn't plan it. He couldn't ask for it. God decided exactly when to do it. And whoop, there's God. He's calling me now, right? I'll get back to you later on. right? But Moshe, because the whole preparation, it was mechubadik, it was with kavod, with honor and specialness. So Rashi says that's what the word vikra means with the small aleph, to distinguish between these two types of relationships, between the one that Moshe had with God, and we all want to have with God, want God to call us vikra, and the one that Bilam had, and all those people in history, who don't have such a close relationship with God, or any relationship at all. The ones who believe in mikra, who believe in circumstantial situations and coincidence, and there's no real design or master plan to history of creation. That's the second relationship, and that's right there in the first word in one little aleph. And this aleph is significant because I know we've discussed this before in the past, but now in this context, especially approaching Pesach, God willing, next week, that it's all about freedom. It's all about this aleph, this little aleph, which, by the way, you have to understand that every Hebrew letter is significant because it's made of other parts. Only the yud, only the letter yud itself is just one part, and for that reason, the Maharal explains, and the truth is the Talmud alludes to this in Menachos, that it corresponds, or at least represents, the world to come, because the world to come is a place lacking complexity. It's the simplest of simple words. There's no physicality there, no materialism. Everything is unified. So the yud corresponds to the world to come. The aleph, which is also a very holy letter, clearly, right, actually is made up of three parts. Two yuds, the top part, the bottom part, are yuds, right? And then you have a vav, like a stick joining them, or is joined to them in the middle. And the gematria is 10 plus 10, because a yud's 10 in gematria. So 2 10s is 20, plus the vav, which is 6, is 26. And of course, that is the gematria of, we call Hashem, the Shem Havaya, the holy name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God, that we don't pronounce the way it's written because we're not on a holy enough level. It's written in the Sidurim, Yud Ke Vav Ke, right? There's a Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, right? But we don't pronounce it the way it's written. Instead, we say a different name of God. You're used to it after a while. It's almost like you look at the word and you think that's what you're reading, but you're not, right? And we'll only get back to that name once Mashiach finally comes. So that the aleph itself alludes to this idea, and because it does, therefore it alludes to the soul of man. So the word Adam is aleph, that aleph, and dam, right? The dam spells the word blood, and blood represents the physical component of a person, right? We're physical beings, which means that we're blood runs through our bodies, and we look at blood as being the symbol of life. So therefore, in the name Adam itself are these two components: the soul, represented by the aleph, which is a piece of God, and then the Dalet Mem, which is the blood, represents the physical component. That's the body itself, and that's what the name Adam alludes to. Now, this aleph also shows up elsewhere, or actually, it shows up by not showing up, because back in Parshas B'Shalach, which is all the way back by the splitting of the sea, before the Jewish people received the Torah, we were attacked. We were attacked by the people called Amalek. Amalek, nasty nation, who went out of their way, a nomadic nation that went out of their way to attack the Jewish people as they were coming out of Egypt, to douse their fire, to cool them off, it says, right? And they're so antithetical to Torah and God's plan for creation that God takes it personally and decides to go to war against them until they're finally going to be completely eradicated from all of creation. Esav, if they're righteous, they can stick around. Other nations, if they're righteous, they can stick around. But Amalek, not one. Now, if some happen to sneak in and convert, as has happened a few times in history, okay, but that's unlikely, and they don't usually do that. And so anybody who's Amaleki, by definition, has to go. Now, the question is whether anybody today can be considered Amaleki, since all the intermarriage is taking place over the generations. But that's a different story. The point is that God says, I am at war with Amalek until the end of time. And I know we've spoken about this before in the past, and you probably read about it as well. But the basic idea is Amalek is not just a nation, it is a concept. just like everybody is, just like Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim means Egypt. You look on the atlas where Egypt is located, you'll find the word Mitzrayim if it's in Hebrew. In the Hebrew atlas, they call it Mitzrayim because that's what the Torah calls Egypt is Mitzrayim, one of the oldest nations in the world. But Mitzrayim, from a Kabbalistic perspective, can be anywhere in the world. It could be America, it could be Canada, it could be England, it could even be Israel to some degree. Because Mitzrayim is made up of two parts, Meitzer Yam, Mem Tzadi Reish, which spells the word Meitzer, and that means like a boundary, a border. And the Yud Mem, according to Kabbalah, is the Gematria 50, which alludes to the 50 gates of understanding, which is the basis of Torah. So therefore, Mitzrayim is any place in the world, at any point in history, that constricts Torah thinking. Period. You go someplace, and the society, the values of the society are contrary to what the Torah says they should be. That's called Mitzrayim from a conceptual point of view. So likewise, Amalek was a people, but only for that period of time. Amalek is a concept. In fact, the gematria of Amalek is equal to the Hebrew word Safek, which means doubt. So Amalek, specifically doubt in God's providence. Now, anybody who either has doubt in God's providence, an agnostic, certainly an atheist, and certainly if they promote that doubt, they can have a spiritual status of being an Amaleki. Got to be careful. It's not such a simple thing to do. So they, are the one, that's the nemesis of the Jewish people, the God goes that war against. And as we are wont to do in Judaism, to give importance to an oath. A person goes to court, I didn't steal that thing. There's no evidence, there's no witnesses, so we make the person take an oath that this thing belongs to him. And anyone can promise anything, but we want to put the fear of God in him. So what do? We make him hold the sacred Torah, maybe some tefillin, and they say, on this holy thing you're holding, take an oath with the name of God, because that's one of the 10 commandments, not to take the name of God, in vain. And that's you'll be doing big time if you lie and take this oath. So they hold something chashuv, something important. What does God hold if he's taking an oath? He is that holiness. So we know there's different levels of God's light, and different names of God apply to different levels. The names really are not God himself per se, but more like manifestations of his light. Descriptions, just like you have, colors, green, red, blue. The frequencies, they're just names we give to certain frequencies. Likewise, Kiviyochel, Lahavdil, all those things, that the names of God are basically descriptions of the light on specific levels in creation. So you can have different levels of God's reality based upon what the name is. So therefore, God himself, when he decides to take a shvu, as he did in the end of Parshat B'Shalach, so then he holds onto something holy, in which case is his kisei hakavod, his throne. And he refers to it in the, as Moshe says, Yad al Keska. Should be Yad al Kisei Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's what it should write. It doesn't write that. It says Yad al Kes. The aleph is missing, and the Vav Hey of Hashem's name is also missing. And Rashi picks up on that and explains that God is saying that until Amalek is eradicated from the world, God's throne is not complete, missing the aleph, and the Vav Kei of God's name is also missing. That won't come back until Amalek is finally destroyed. That's what it says in Parshat B'Shalach. So again, the aleph is showing up, except just the opposite. Here it doesn't show up. By not showing up, it shows up in a sense. It makes the point. And it's the same aleph. The same aleph as Adam, the same aleph as in Vayikra as well. So what's the basis of this aleph? Why is it such an important thing? Kabbalah explains that in the beginning, when Adam HaRishon, the first man, was made, he wasn't made the same way that we're made today. Today we have flesh and blood, hands and bodies. We're quite physical. If I wanted to walk through a wall, I probably would break my head. I can't do it. Although physics does say if you keep trying, eventually you will actually walk through the wall. But more than likely, it won't happen soon enough. So you'll probably give up long before you do that. Not quite sure the physics behind all that, but But the point is that physically it's very hard to do anything that goes against the laws of physics. We're bound by them to a large degree. But that's only post chet of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Before the tree of knowledge of good and evil, before Adam made the mistake of eating from the forbidden fruit, he was on a level called kasanas or kasnas or. Literally, it means clothing of light. Now, if you look in the Torah, it says that Adam Arishon he didn't have any clothing. Below Yisbosheshu. Well, they weren't embarrassed because there was no Yetzer Hara, no concept of abusing anything creation. So therefore, there was no need for modesty because they were all naturally modest. They were all made but some Elohim in the image of God, and they lived that way. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, which he ate for an altruistic reason, that unfortunately went south, didn't work out in the end the way he planned. Eventually changed him. It transformed him and the world. So when it says that God made Adam clothing, it's not because he wasn't wearing clothing before, as it seems to be from the verses themselves. Kabbalah explains that he had clothing, but instead his clothing was the actual skin. And his skin was made from divine light, a little bit like what Moshe Rabbeinu looked like when he came down from the mountain after God passed by him, for the very same reason. He got a little bit of that light, and it was terrifying for everybody. But Adam was completely this light. The whole world was this light. Chava, everything, before the ched. Kasanos or, spelled Aleph Vav Resh with an Aleph. Clothing of light. So he had clothing, but it wasn't physical clothing. It was clothing that was made from divine light. And if he were here today, it's not like we couldn't look at him. No, we wouldn't even see him. It's such a spiritual, high-level light that we wouldn't be able to even perceive him. That's how spiritual it was. But when he made the mistake of eating from the Eitz Hadas Tov Hara, and I can show you a book behind me that explains what that sin entailed. I mean, the way you look at it, right? It's like, well, there's a tree with fruit hanging down from it, and God said, "Don't eat that fruit." And Adam walked over, like someone walks into a store, picks up a fruit, takes a bite. That's it. Now, everything that went wrong because he just didn't listen to his father, who told him no cookies before supper, right? And he didn't obey. So many questions on that explanation. And it's far deeper, far, far more profound than that. It has to do with the spheres and Kabbalah and ideas that most people wouldn't even grasp without any background information to understand them. But the Torah presents is a simple explanation that we just get an idea and then go deeper. We have Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. The simple explanation, hints, we have exegetical teachings, and of course we have Kabbalah to explain all of that. Just like creation is all deep, 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 deep stuff in the end. So in the beginning, he had this Kasanas Or. He was way up in creation. He was extremely, extremely, extremely high level. And then when he ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov Hara, he changed himself and he changed the world. He physicalized. And he became what we call Kasanas Or with an ayin. Now he has clothing, but the clothing of skin, the exact same, phonetic pronunciation, or Aleph Vav Resh, or Ayin Vav Resh. The Aleph is transformed into an Ayin. The light becomes skin and the physical existence of man. And we're all going to go back there eventually. You can't go to the world to come like this. We're just too physical. It's like we can barely climb a ladder without getting out of breath. You certainly can't go to the world to come with this physical presence and being. You have to be transformed. Learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, that's all part of the process of getting back to Kasanas Or with an Aleph. That's freedom. That's freedom. As long as we are physical like this, we are bound. We are limited. We're used to it. We accept it. And we have freedom, of speech and freedom to eat what you want, more or less, and all kinds of different versions of freedom. But we're not really free. And just ask yourself how many times a day you actually make a free will decision. But before you do that, you might want to ask yourself what it means to make a free will decision. Choosing between chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream is not exactly a free will decision. It's a preference. I like this one more than the other one. Choosing between sleeping a little bit later and getting up on time can be a free will decision, especially if you're really enjoying sleeping in and you have to be someplace else, like davening, for example. So what's the difference? Very simply, and we could talk about this for a good hour as well, but that's not the time right now. Free will, from a Torah perspective, is choosing to do that which is morally correct, especially when you don't feel like doing it. As my Rosh Hashiva used to always tell us, do what you want to do, not what you feel like doing. If they both happen to coincide, it's your lucky day, and you're probably a tzaddik. So but I want to do the comfortable thing. I want to go, to this restaurant and eat fancy food. No, that's not what you feel like doing. So then, what do I want to do? So we have these two components: the dam and the aleph. The aleph alludes to the soul. The soul's got an agenda, and the body has an agenda. What's the soul's agenda? To perfect itself, to rectify itself, to be a partner with creation in the fulfillment of creation, and the fulfillment of the mandate for creation. And what's the body's agenda? Comfort. That's fame. It's all part of comfort. Good food. It's all part of comfort. The body's only interested in eating. It's not usually the body that's telling you to do that. I only want to eat healthy food. I only want to eat as much food as necessary to get up and go do my next mitzvah. That's not usually the body speaking. That's usually the soul. The body tends to be selfish, self-centered, instinctual, because that's what it's supposed to do. That's what it's trained to do. That's how it was created. It's the soul's responsibility to educate the body and make it more like itself. But unfortunately, it tends to work out the other way around. But the body tends to, take over the soul, harness its energy to do what the body wants in the end. And we call that the 49 levels of spiritual impurity. And that's what the Jewish people were holding before the first plague began. And that's why the first plague is the plague of blood. Because God's telling the Jewish people, because you can't fix what you don't think is broken. Right? If you don't think it's broken, what's the fix? So God says, no, there's something broken over here. But let me tell you what it is. So the first plague is blood, to tell the Jewish people that not only am I assaulting the Egyptian idea of what a God is, but I'm doing it with something that basically is telling you that you are holding on the level of the Dalet Mem, but not the Aleph. You want to be free? You have to build up that Aleph. You have to build up the soul. You have to be in touch with your soul. You have to let your soul be the driver. It's like, you get into a car. Happens to be that today the cars do drive the people, although based upon what the person wants. But you're the driver. You tell the car where to go. That's what has to happen. The moment the car tells you where to go, you're in trouble. That's dangerous. They've had some serious car accidents because of that. So this is the whole struggle. And that's why the word for freedom, for redemption in Judaism, which is geula, happens to be equal in gematria, in numerical value, to the word Adam. Adam is Aleph Dalet Mem, which is 1 plus 4 plus 40 equals 45. Geula is Gimel Aleph Vav Lamed Hey. Add them up, right? 3 plus 1 plus 6 plus 30 plus 5 equals 45. To say that only a person who is this composite, they've got this balance of the Aleph and the Dalet Mem, right? That's the person who is going to be redeemed and going to be free. The reason why I'm mentioning this right now is because it often comes up as a question, and all the time you look at the Haggadah, and you have the evil son, the Rasha. And this will be the last class before Pesach, B'ezras Hashem, because next Thursday night we're going to actually be checking for Chumetz already. But you have the evil son who is asking the question, Ma ha'avodas azos lachem? What is this avoda? What does this service mean to you? You have to pay attention to the words. The Haggadah was painstakingly written in such a way that you could stop on every word and come up with a Devar Torah and an insight about life itself. Don't just read through it. I mean, Hebrew is the best because the Hebrew is more accurate. English translations, as Aryeh Kaplan Zatzal once wrote, beginning of the Living Torah, Every translation is an interpretation by definition. So you're not getting the real thing. The Hebrew, that's the ultimate, because that's the way God said it. That's the way it's meant to be understood. Or in this case, that's the way the rabbi said it and meant to be understood. So he says, Ma, well, the truth is that comes from the Torah. Ma avoda azos lechem. What is this avoda to you? And, lots of commentaries on this particular question and this particular child. And you have to realize that the whole thing is also a metaphor for every individual. We have all 4 children inside of us. Different times of life, different times of the day. Sometimes we can fluctuate between the Chacham and the Rasha and the Tam and Enu Yedei L'Shol. It's all part of, it's all part of the instructions that we're getting from the Haggadah in order to be able to achieve personal and eventually national freedom. So he asked, what is this avoda? What do you mean avoda? Servitude. He's asking a question. It's loaded. And it's a question that's been asked for the ages. Someone actually just asking this question as I was walking him tonight from Mariv. And he asked me this question because he wants to deal with it also at his Seder table. It's a classic question they always ask. God says in the 10 Commandments, I am the Lord your God. You owe me. You know why? Because I took you out of Egypt. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt from the servitude of the Mitzrayim. And what? Well, first of all, 2 things. Number 1, didn't you put us there? Weren't you the one who caused us to go down there? 100%, right? Second of all, is that what did we gain? So we left one slavery for another slavery. That's what the Rush is saying. He's saying that, yeah, great. I believe God took us out of Egypt. He took us from the avoda of Farach and the Paro, not yet. But he took us to Mount Sinai and said, okay, now that you're out, now that you're free, here, 613 mitzvahs. What? I thought we were being taken out to be free, not to be change ownership. Like become stopping a slave to Paro and becoming a slave instead to God. That's what you're doing to me. Josh is saying. No. It's like somebody who decides he wants to be an executive. He walks up to his boss and he says, I think I'm executive material. I think I deserve a promotion, a raise, the whole thing. And the boss says, well, it's possible, right? But you have to understand, there's a lot of responsibility. So I'm ready for it. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, in order for you to be able to even be considered for such a promotion, you need to take a 3-week seminar. It's hard, time-consuming. You'll be learning day and night, pretty much. Homework, assignments and tests and all that. And if you come out at the end of the 3 weeks and you're able to, you've done well enough, we will promote you, okay? And you'll get all the benefits, including the key to the executive kitchen. And you'll be able to get all those benefits in the end. Sign me up, right? And he goes and he signs up and he starts going, takes it seriously. But after a week, it starts to tire him out, a lot. He doesn't do the same thing. It's like he starts to become worn down. He's not so sure that he can keep up the pace anymore at this point in time. And he struggles and, barely, gets to the end of the course. And in the end, his mark is not so great in the end. And he sits down across from his boss, wondering what's going to be. And then, he finishes the course, but the boss says to him, he says, listen, the very fact that you enrolled is significant. The very fact you stuck it out, more or less, is significant. But listen, you didn't do that well. You didn't live up to the expectations of executives, in this business. However, because I see your artist and hard work, and because I understand that you are, you really want to, contribute, I'm going to allow you to start in this position and then work your way up. So we went down to Mitzrayim, not for God. We went down there to become a nation, to become a people, to become rectified. Unfortunately, we didn't stick with the program. As it says, we went down to sojourn. We went down to gain something, to pull out holy sparks and bring them back to the side of. There's all kinds of explanations, Kabbalistically, deep Kabbalistic explanations as to why we had to go down to Egypt. That was for us. But while we were there, we didn't accomplish what we were supposed to accomplish. And really, technically speaking, God could have said, well, you didn't live up to the expectations. So I'm leaving you behind. But he made a promise with Avram Avinu that I will take them out anyhow. So God says, it's early and you're not really worthy of it. But however, I will, for the sake of the covenant I made with your ancestor, and because, you can develop into that kind of a nation, I'm going to free you. That you went down there, that was for your own good. That was to fulfill yourselves. So I don't have to mention that. That was a gift, so to speak. That was enrolling in the seminar. But what you did while you were there, that was your thing. And I could have left you behind, but I took you out. And I'll even go one step further. I'm going to give you a Torah. And in that Torah will be 613 mitzvahs. Whoa! Commandments? 613 commandments? For what? To do what? Because God's bored? He wants to see what we can do for him? Because he's missing something and we can fulfill it? Because of some kind of lack that he can't do and take care of on his own, and we're going to do it through our hard work and our toil and struggle? God is perfect. It's a fundamental. Everything he does for us, not for himself, because he needs nothing. He's not a tyrant. He's not a despot. He's not a Pharaoh. In any stretch of the imagination, Pharaoh made us work not for us, for him. That's called servitude. That's slavery. But God makes us work for ourselves to develop the Aleph. That's what the Torah does. To ask any Baal Tshuva, anybody who went from being secular to becoming religious, what the process is all about. It's not manipulation. It's not brainwashing. It's none of that stuff. Information, knowledge that allows a person to develop their Aleph so that they can become a full-fledged Adam, an Adam Shalem, a complete person. And when they do that and they get the Aleph and the Dalet and the Mem, which is what the whole Haggadah and the whole Seder is coming to do for us, the whole Torah is coming to do for us, that person is able to reach the level of Geula and become free. And if that sounds simple enough, you should know in the course of history, there have not been that many free people, including within the Jewish people. People they don't finish the program. They don't go the full distance. They have it in their hands and their possession. It was given to us. And they don't use it properly, or they use it completely. And we remain enslaved to our Kesonas Or, to the ayin of Amalek, to the ayin of Or, as opposed to with the Aleph, right? Instead of becoming lighter, we become darker, more physical, more material, thinking we're free. I got a better car, I got a bigger house, I'm free, I got more money. Great stuff, believe me. I don't turn it down. not talking against it. But if you think that's going to buy you freedom, forget it. On the contrary, just the opposite. As the Gemara says, usually materialism comes at the cost of spirituality. And that's why, according to the Maharal, the matzah is on the Seder table. Amongst all this plenty and all beauty, and the whole thing is like a king's table, but the matzah is a poor man's bread, to remind us that you're not really free unless you are free to do what you want and not just what you feel like doing. And what you want to do is be like a soul. You know why? Because as the Arizal explains very clearly, you are not your body. You may look at your body, you may dress your body, you may, be deceived into believing that someone else's body is them. And, we all talk to bodies like we're all bodies, but the body is like clothing. It's like, it's ridiculous to think that you are the body as it is to think that your clothing is you. Clothing makes the person, so to speak, but they don't do much more than that. They can help the person, but the essence of who you are, that's your soul. And that's the want. The source of the want is the Aleph, your soul. The Haggadah, Pesach, all of it comes to help us remember that, to realize that, to move on from just being the dumb, right? Stop being so dumb and work instead towards being more the Aleph, to complete that relationship of the Aleph and the Dalet Mem, achieve the Gula, achieve the redemption, and actually enjoy freedom on the ultimate level. Because unfortunately, it's just so many people are just mired in the exile, mired in the shibud, mired in the slavery, even though they think they're completely free. And we have an opportunity all year round, but specifically Leil Seder, because we get special extra help from Shemayim, special extra light to do it. we should merit to do so. You have a Chag Kosher Sameach, Shabbat Shalom as well, B'ezras Hashem, and God willing, we'll pick up again after the holiday.